It's time for PaleoRadio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering PaleoRadio.
Welcome to PaleoRadio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
What an amazing day it is to be alive, all you crazy paleocrats out there. I am Jeremiah Bannister.
And I am Joe Elder.
And you're listening to PaleoRadio. It's a totally fabulous program that covers current events and politics and religion and culture. And today we're going to be talking Speedos.
Yeah, we'll be talking about Speedos. We're going to be talking about if black people have the right to open carry or carry guns in general in the United States, or if that's a double standard.
And Earth's CO2 levels just crossed a really scary threshold, and it's permanent. It's a one-way ticket to the end of the world. This is over at ScienceAlert.com. And I say that in jest a little bit because it sounds apocalyptic, and I think that with headlines the way they are and clickbait the way it is, it's almost like The Boy Who Cried Wolf, because this is actually really freaking serious.
Sure. Well,
it's a big deal.
Whenever I hear people talk about the end of the world, I always think Carlin. We'll get into that later into the segment, but I always think about George Carlin and his ideas of that.
Yeah, and so if you'd like to call, we definitely invite you to join the conversation. If you noticed, we actually trimmed down there to 3 subjects. And there's a reason for this. Longtime listeners of the show might be bummed out and say, well, I'm so used to 4. You know, but we're sitting here on an hour doing live programming with callers. No way.
Yeah, it's hard to get through 4 segments, but we do appreciate the calls, so we just decided, is it worth it to trade one segment for the callers? The answer to that is yes.
Absolutely. So if you'd like, give us a call, 616-656-1680. We want to thank everybody listening on WPRR, as well as all those in Pontiac, Illinois, listening on WPJC.
Yeah, thank you, Illinois. And good luck with your football team.
You know,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, good luck.
I had to do it.
Yeah.
The Fighting Illini, go team.
So, all right, 616-656-1680. All right, with no further ado, my friend, the first one, and you brought this one up. This is a fantastic article by Eugene Robinson, and just as a side note, I've met him. Well,
Really?
I shook his hand. You know, I was in line
cool.
with him getting some food with a bunch of people in the press and kind of the wonks and the special class.
Yeah.
So got to meet him. A super tall guy. Yeah, he debated somebody from the Bush administration. I don't know if it was Patriot Act or what. I forget. I mean, it wasn't. It was a night to remember. Let's just put it that way.
That's really interesting. I'm going to have to ask you more about that later.
All right. In America, gun rights are for whites only. This is by Eugene Robinson over at Washington Post, and he says this: if you're a black man in America, exercising your constitutional right to keep and bear arms can be fatal. You might think the National Rifle Association and its Amen chorus would be outraged, but apparently they believe Second Amendment rights are for whites only. And he bases this off a couple stories, Keith Lamont Scott in Charlotte, and then Terrence Crutcher in Tulsa. And so he talks about this. And listen, I remember, Joe, and you may have been the one to show me this, the Bill O'Reilly episode, where there's a guy, and it's a really good example of kind of what Eugene's getting at.
Yeah, Tavis Smiley was on Fox News, and Bill O'Reilly and him were talking about gun rights and the right to own weapons and what to do. And Bill O'Reilly wanted to talk about democratically ruled, with quotations, cities that have already had these high gun laws and a lot of gun laws and not having the murder rates go down. But Tavis Smiley counters right at the end of the video. And pretty much you don't have to listen to any of the video but the end. But Tavis comes through and says, well, you know, Bill, what we ought to do is arm every black woman, man, and child, or anyone who can open carry, and have them fight against this oppressive government that is attacking them. What do you think about that? And Riley goes, let's not get too crazy. So it's funny because the NRA rhetoric that's always been there about you need to defend yourself against the oppressive government. The reason we have our guns is to shoot against the government when they come to get us. And then when you have black people go, man, that kind of rings a bell with how I feel I'm being treated here in this country. Maybe I should take up arms in defense of this oppressive government. And everyone goes, oh, crap, man, don't do that. Well, we got to think about some rules and some changes. We can't get too crazy.
Yeah, we got to keep guns out of the hands of black people. And as I said, That video of O'Reilly, everybody, you just got to see his face. I mean, it is literally lights on, lights off.
Sure.
As soon as he gets the gist of Smiley's argument, it's like, well, I don't know about that. I don't know how safe that would be.
And it was a clever roping by Smiley, because he throws out was saying, well, we need to have gun laws and regulations for everybody. And O'Reilly goes on the diatribe of, no, everyone needs to have these guns to defend themselves from the government, da-da-da. And then Tavis hits with, you're right. You know, maybe black people ought to do that. And O'Reilly, can't get too crazy.
Yeah, the situation, there's a Huffington Post article, too, that you mentioned, having to do with what happened. I mean, people kind of remember, it's not that long ago that a bunch of white dudes occupied a government building, and they were armed. We all watched it on...
A bird sanctuary.
We watched it on TV, and it wasn't really focused so much at the time on the fact that they were all white people.
Well, right? And there was a very cautious approach to how to deal with that.
Yeah, you had to stand back. Now, somebody died.
Yeah.
Somebody eventually died, right? Somebody got shot. But
and in a very undemocratic way.
Yeah, by the way.
Yeah.
That was really not
noted,
a good thing.
it was an absolutely undemocratic way.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that feel that was unjust, I think rightly so in some cases, but at the same time, to the point, when it was done by people of a different race, it was treated differently. So the HuffPo article that I have is by Nick Wing, who is the senior viral editor of Huffington Post, and it's, here's how the nation responded when a black militia group occupied a government building. If you're not familiar with the history of protest in the U.S., you might not know that the armed occupation of government buildings hasn't always been just for white guys. In fact, on May 2nd, 1967, a group of 30 Black Panthers walked into the California State Capitol building, toting rifles and shotguns, and quickly garnered national headlines. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale formed the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense as a small community organization based in Oakland, California. Its members, including 30 people who would travel to Sacramento the following May, believed that black Americans should exercise their constitutional right to defend themselves against an oppressive U.S. government. Does that sound familiar? At the same time, California lawmakers were trying to strip them of that right, and the Black Panthers wanted to tell the U.S. and the world that they found this unacceptable. So the kicker is what happens after it. So the Black Panthers, they arm up, they go into the Capitol building, peaceful protest, nobody gets shot, nothing happens in that sense. But after they leave, a lot goes on. So Don Mulford, a GOP assemblyman who represented Oakland, responded to the Black Panther police patrols in 1967 with a bill to strip Californians of the right to openly carry firearms. Mm-hmm. So a bill was introduced almost immediately to restrict gun rights right then and there. Bam. Mulford's legislation, which became known as the Panthers Bill, passed with the support of the NRA, which apparently believed the whole good guy with a gun thing didn't apply to black people. California Governor Ronald Reagan, and Saint Reagan, as we can call him here too, would later campaign for president as the steadfast defender of the Second Amendment and signed the bill into law. So Ronald Reagan didn't have a problem with it either.
Yeah. Now, in fairness, and I'll throw this out there.
Sure.
I'll throw this out there. A lot of people now, when they talk about people open carrying, the reaction is that they don't like that. It's unsettling. There's a big uproar about this. So, in a way, they ended up doing something that gun control advocates would like for them to do, maybe for the wrong reason, because they saw a bunch of black people with guns. They said, whoa, that's a bad thing. But the actual bill itself that was voted on would be something that would be agreed upon by a lot of people anyway in the gun control movement.
Well, that's why it's a win-win for liberals in that argument, because they'd say, we need to have gun legislation, and they say no, and then we'll say, well, then you're a hypocrite because of how you feel if black people handle the guns. So either way, they win with the law that gets turned into place. And I've said this ironically and comically and probably with kind of low taste, but I've said, hey, if you want gun legislation, allow black people to open carry anywhere near a government building, and you'll get your gun legislation immediately. Because it's completely hypocritical. I think it is on all rights. You could do it today. If there was some sort of armed militia that was like the Oath Keepers that went to St. Louis and stood around during Ferguson, the white guys in camo with AR-15s and shotguns and everything they had, who were just standing there in the middle of the riots and didn't get agitated at all. If that group happened to be black and was somewhere around Lansing, you would see gun legislation like that.
Big time.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, without a doubt. Now, Robinson mentions Keith Lamont Scott. Right.
Yes.
And he talks about how the relatives said that he was armed. Police say he was armed. Now, this article is a little bit older. I think we got it last week, and I think we've learned since that he did have a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
But the question then becomes, why was he approached in the first place?
And yeah, because
it's an open carry state.
Yes, and I think that's the big kicker, is that in North Carolina it is an open carry state. So the reason why they were looking for a warrant for someone, he doesn't match the description of the person with a warrant. He gets into his car and they just approached him.
Yeah, they said they had reason to suspect they were looking for somebody that they thought maybe he looked like. It's real hazy. They said he got out of the car and then he got back into the car. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, yes. I mean,
what's
a guy
illegal
gets
about
out
it?
of the car and gets back into the car. Was there any reason that he thought maybe he should have stayed out? Did you tell him not to move or something?
Yeah.
What's going on with this? But come to find out, he had an illegal gun and that he threatened his family with it beforehand. I mean, it's like one of those where it's like you shouldn't have approached the guy, but in the end, and you shouldn't have shot the guy maybe, unless he
Yes.
had a gun and he was pointing a gun.
True.
But at the same time, his wife, I think the one in the video, in fact, had a restraining order against him because he said that he threatened her.
Yes.
Physically, he was violent against her and the son, and also threatened to shoot her.
She also told the police he had a traumatic brain injury.
Big time.
And I think the other thing, too, is this is something that is just a quip that I have to mention, is that when a black person gets shot, we go into their history to talk about the negative things that happened to them in the past. Or when if it happens to be a person that's violated a crime when they're white, a lot of times we look to their future and what they could be. For instance, and it's not with the shootings, but if someone has a warrant out for their arrest and they're selling CDs, is that a death warrant? If someone has an illegal gun and they've purchased it but they haven't shot anyone and he's sitting in his car, is that a death warrant? That I think is the bigger question. And
they shouldn't have even. There's no reason to approach the guy. I mean, if they say, "Well, I would like to know on what basis they thought that he looked like the person they were looking for, or that he might possibly be associated in some way," I'd like them to unpack that a little bit.
The biggest one, the most relevant one for this argument, I think, is with Philando Castile in Falcon Heights, Minnesota. This is going back to the article. After pulling him over on a traffic stop, officers approached the car. Castile told them he had a license to carry a handgun, and I can only assume that Castile made this declaration so the officers would not be surprised upon seeing the gun. But rather than assure them he was a law-abiding citizen exercising his constitutional right, Castile's announcement had the opposite effect. The horror that ensued was live-streamed on Facebook by Castile's girlfriend, Diamond Reynolds. Her cell phone video was calm, composed, in a narration of in a very chilling event, especially to those around us who frequently commit the offense of driving while black.
Yeah, and if you want to see the crazy explaining away of a lot of this stuff, you can go to Louder with Crowder, because he's got terrible videos where he literally sounds like he's explaining away so much. Anyway, we'll be back right after this.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Welcome back to Paleo Radio, live in studio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. The Earth's CO2 levels have just crossed a really scary threshold, and it's permanent, Jeremiah.
It's totally permanent, and I hate doing this, and I hope you totally forgive me, Joe. I know you will. You love me like crazy.
I do.
But I want to say something about this, because we got past toward the end, and we didn't finish the whole story, but you got Philando Castile, the one you brought up toward the end. People need to just take a mental note. We're talking about the guy who had the right to carry, legally had the right. He was asked to get his identification. He reaches over to get his identification. He gets shot.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a real situation. So the thing is that Castile was pulled over 52 times for traffic violations.
52.
Right. So here you not only have, I mean, it's just a mind-boggling amount of insult that's added on to this permanent injury of his death.
Yeah.
By this, for that to be revealed and say that here's a guy who went the legal route, has a gun, right, defies so many prejudiced ideas about a black man with a gun. Here's a guy who totally obeys the rules. He totally goes the legal route. He totally goes through the training. in order to get it. He does the proper thing to a cop. And behind the scenes, not only does he get shot, but through it we learn that dude was pulled over 52 times.
Yeah. And he's 32, so just to give that context, only 16 years he was pulled over 52 times.
It's unbelievable.
16 years of driving.
It's unbelievable.
Never even had anything like a license suspended, anything of that sort. Nothing. So, that's
and
crazy.
not every person pulled over is Castile. Not everybody who owns a gun, white or black, not everybody does that. But people, when they see these stories, it's so easy to just gloss right over that stuff and not to realize that for some people, even the most law-abiding people, that sometimes black people, that sometimes there's a long history of injustice that's done toward them on a day-to-day routine. I mean, that's part of your lifestyle at that point, to get pulled over 52 times in 16 years.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is this is just, I think, something to think about in terms of how old we are as a country and how much this matters. When the African American History Museum that opened up, that Obama has just he opened it up a couple weeks ago. The person that helped ring that bell for him and with him, her grandfather was a slave, legally. That's 2 generations, and you have 2 generations. But also you have the fact that there's almost as long as we were a country, we've been a country. That was almost as long as we were a colony with black people here working the fields. 200 years almost before we had the colonization and had and went for independence as America. So this history of slavery is not just 200 years old. It's 400 years old, and only 2 generations ended. So to think that there's still some residual effect from that would be assumed, I think. It's just a thought.
That it doesn't just go away. And actually, I'd like to maybe in the future talk about that article that was talking about a study that said that trauma from the Holocaust had long-lasting effects. That even genetically, like in the DNA of people, that this is how it played itself out. And I'd like to know, if you take the Holocaust scenario and then you say, well, what about slavery for African Americans? How would that play out? Is there studies? Maybe there's studies that have already been done. There are already studies done.
I can find out the person's name, but it actually has been looked into quite a bit, and there is evidence of generational trauma. That definitely, historical trauma, and it's definitely there, and it rewires your brain a different way. I would hesitate to say DNA because that suggests a different, a biological difference between races. It's not so much biological as it is the sociological pathways that get changed in that way, But it's definitely present in the brain, and it's definitely, you see the evidence on brain scans.
Wow.
The trauma is built into the wiring. They're still going through PTSD from slavery on a day-to-day basis because things have changed, but things have changed in a way they look different. But fundamentally, in the past 40 years, we're going through a lot of the same issues,
That's something to chew on for the people who are always accusing blacks of being part of a victim cult.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious about that.
I know
that's
it.
for
Yeah,
real.
it
I mean,
is.
there's something with scientific data. Say, hey, look, chew on that for a second or two.
That's right.
And by the way, I got to say, Lauren, thank you for the save.
Yes.
Big time. We're so grateful for you. And I never shared that picture from last week, Joe.
Oh, we need to.
Of the whole gang. The whole gang was here. It was a whole bunch of fun. Because people are not familiar. If they listen to the show, she's a new voice. She's a new person in the room. Keeps things flowing.
Yeah, the amazing Lauren Jens. Thank you, guys.
I do what I can.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to get into this now. Earth's CO2 levels just crossed really scary threshold, and it's permanent. This is from Science Alert. Mm-hmm. According to the latest figures, levels of atmospheric carbon have officially surpassed 400 parts per million. There's little hope of returning them to safe levels, and the situation is now permanent. So what's the big deal about 400 parts per million? Well, the safe level of CO2 in the atmosphere is considered to be 350. And the last time Earth experienced levels that were consistently this high was roughly 4 million years ago.
That's really sexy.
It is.
Yeah, we're doing a great job, folks.
Yeah, knocking it right up there.
Yeah.
This means humans have literally never experienced CO2 like this before. So it's hard to anticipate what's going to come next because we haven't ever been able to measure something in this level. We've never seen the Earth behave at this level in real time. We've only been able to look back in the geological record of what's happened when the Earth was at this point, and it's not good.
We're like living, breathing e-cigs. Like we're not been around long enough to get a whole bunch of really fantastic data, but we're just living through it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And according to the research at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, the CO2 value for September 2016 will definitely be above 400 ppm and will likely be around 401. And here's the thing, September typically has the lowest atmospheric CO2 levels of the year. So September, when we hit into fall and you see that dip in temperature, that's actually a transfer from there's a lot of CO2 in the oceans. It transfers up into the air, and it's a circle. It's a cycle just like water takes through precipitation. That exact thing is going on, but it's going to be a lot worse now. And so when you see September, you see that dip in time, and you're expecting the CO2 levels to be low. They're saying even at this point, 400 parts per million without a doubt. That's scary.
And it's scary that I don't know if there's really much hope in this article. I mean, I know that the way that it's worded in the title it's not necessarily indicative of the substance of this, but there's not much hope really given to the possibility of turning back the tides anytime soon. So whatever this is going to do to humans, and again, stressing the fact that we haven't been through anything like this before. We can't look back into the ancient texts and find out what happened when this thing struck. So we don't really have that for us.
That's
and
right.
It's relatively frightening thing.
And the one thing I wanted to bring up, too, when I said George Carlin is George Carlin always says when they say the end of the world, they don't mean the actual end of the blue ball that goes around the planet. That's going to be just fine. When humans leave, it is going to survive. It will probably create life afterward that would be different, could be even better. But human life, humans' world, the idea of mankind and humanity, now that's the something that's threatened by such a thing. Think about Louisiana, where right now in Louisiana there's been heavy flooding. How many millions of dollars is it to relocate a lot of those homes or even rebuild homes underneath the sea level, which is ridiculous at this point because it would happen again. But think about the money that we're investing in that just to relocate people. When you have oceanic sea level rise, which we're going to get from this, it's going to happen. It's no longer a potential thing. In the next 50 years, we could see 6 inches. I mean, we're talking about cities that have a flood, and then all of a sudden the city stays flooded. That's that, folks. People move. The water doesn't go away.
Where is it in Europe? There was a place.
Venice.
In Venice. And it's so weird to go and to check out these pictures, and I encourage everybody to do it. Go and look on Google about Venice and the flooding that goes on literally daily.
Absolutely.
With the tide. And you can be sitting there drinking some coffee, sipping on your espresso, and you got water up to your knees. Yep. And you're like, wow, this is a really weird thing, man. Wow, that's really strange. And people are seeing this, and they go online, and they say, man, look, there's flooding over here. There's flooding over there. There's this kind of crazy weather. That's really weird. And you're like, and you're the same people who for a long time have said that the science behind global warming that literally predicted this kind of behavior in nature, that you have denied it, that you've ridiculed it, and that you have committed participating in a self-fulfilled prophecy that said there's nothing we can do, and now we may be at a place where there's very little to nothing that we can actually do.
Yes. Do I think that human beings will not survive this? No, I actually think we will survive it. I don't think our numbers could stay as high. I really do. When people talk about the end of the world, no. But could this be something that could wipe, in the course of 500 years, wipe 1 billion people off Earth? Sure. Sure it could. Yeah, I think that's plausible. The other thing to think about, too, is when you have the CO2 levels so high in the atmosphere, that doesn't make new storms. It makes the storms that were already there stronger. So what happens is when you have high winds in the center of the Atlantic Ocean that are swirling, that just don't make it to a hurricane, now the conditions are right where it does indeed become a hurricane. You're going to see more of those. It's not creating more. The avenues where the storms are already there, for instance, just south of the jet stream in the U.S., where there's Tornado Alley in Oklahoma, expect that to be devastating in the future.
And
devastating.
And yes, you can still enjoy a pork bun in a tsunami or a hurricane. That was evidenced by a very brave soul who did it. But you know what? We see that and giggle, but the fact is that area is hit. People, it damages homes, it damages property, it damages things that precious belongings that you have that might all of a sudden be gone, like family portraits or anything like that. And you say, this is a really big deal. And at least more people are watching enough on social media that they're seeing all of these different places that are being ravaged by things predicted by people embracing these models and making forecasts of this nature and saying, maybe there's something to this. I think that it's a baby step.
It is.
It is.
But droughts in Korea. The road's so hot in India that people's sandals are melting to them. People dying of heat stroke all across India and the Middle East for the past 2 years. It's been documented. It is going up. Lack of crop produced in most of the areas where there usually is high crops being produced, and people are starving out because of that. Now, when you're in a first world country, you don't see those effects first. You see those last. So obviously, we're not the ones that suffer from lower exports of corn in our years when Nebraska's pretty dried up, right? It's going to be the country we're exporting out to, but eventually it gets around to it. But if you're thinking about it like a human element, this is something that affects us all, and it's something that at this point is not going to happen. In the article, they said even if by some miracle we all stopped emitting carbon dioxide tomorrow, it would take decades to get us back to 400 parts per million, and we all know that's never going to happen.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
I love that intro there, Nathan. We love you like crazy. And listen, if you want to connect with Darren, he's the man. He's on a couple different shows here at the station at PRR. He's also the manager of all things and all goings on, Public Reality Radio. If you want to talk to him to get through to us, we've made it super easy. 616-656-1680. Again, 616-656-1680. Putting the brakes on, Joe. We got to talk about something that happened in the meantime, between programs. Between last week and this week, we got together with some really cool friends. And it was the first time you met one of them.
Yeah, it was the first time I got to meet my good pal, my good online pal, now real-life pal, Chris Hanna.
Chris Hanna. So Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna, they're of Cellar Door Skeptics. Okay, it's a podcast. You can check them out. They're on Spreaker. It's got a fantastic name and fantastic intro voice, too. The guy who does it is real professional.
Yeah, he's a top-notch guy, being that it's you.
Being that it's me. And so we love these guys. They're obviously important to us. They're good friends in real life. They've been with us through many different things. In fact, when we got together, Joe, and we decided to do Paleo Radio again, it was with them. They were on, in fact, Chris Tanner is on the first Paleo Radio Google Hangout that was with you and I.
Yes, he is.
Because that's where his pants, his butt crack stuck out the back.
Great moment.
You got to go back and check it out. I think he even highlighted it. It was one of those best of moments.
Those are the little blurbs that you guys can find, the little awesome nuggets that we have hiding in our YouTube channel.
Oh, that's so terrible. So you can go and find that, and see Christopher Tanner. But these guys have been doing a podcast now for a year. And so they do, what was it? Is their 50th video or 50th podcast? But I thought it was a year long. Maybe it was just the 50th podcast. Either which way, it's a cool
50th podcast and a year, I think.
I think so. I think it was a double whammy on that, double feature.
Yeah.
And so we were invited as the guests. And it was tons of fun because what we did is we talked about the presidential debates.
Yeah, and we got to go in depth and have basically an hour to just share kind of our opinions and views. It was a lot of fun. There was some drinking involved, which made that fun as well. It was a great time.
Yeah, being able to enjoy a Jaeger bomb during the show. I don't even know when the last time I drank during the show was. I used to do that on Google Hangouts. When we did that and stuff, if I was being interviewed, I'd always pop a nice beer or something. But they had us on, and it was so much fun. We got to talk to them. We got to talk about the debates. But I had to cut out.
Yeah.
I had to cut out early. And so I wasn't able to stay around for the fascinating discussion afterward.
Yep.
And I told Chris, I talked to him, and I said, I wish I would have been able to stay. So we're just going to have to do one of two things. Actually, let's make it instead of an either or, let's make it a both and. We like that. To say we need to be back on Cellar Door Skeptics to talk about a lot of the issues that came up afterwards, stuff to do with secular movement or activism or SJWs or anything like that. So, democratic socialism, whatever.
Yes.
To talk about that and also to bring him here.
Yeah, they need to come into WPRR studios and crack a show with us, which we're going to be getting a hold of them, and hopefully they will be able to do. And I think it's going to be fun. Plus, so many different values and so many different thoughts that go on when you get a group of people like that together. Between Celador Skeptics and us, there's plenty of diverse opinions, but we all are good friends and we're all able to share those opinions in a candid way, which I think it makes it fun, makes it enjoyable, and hey, sometimes you learn something.
And if you want to hear what Joe and I thought about it, and we actually, I'll say this, we can talk about this a little longer, is that we got to hang out the night before. We actually were at his house, 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
And the first night, and you can go see these pictures on our Twitter at PaleoRadio Show, as well as on our Facebook page, facebook.com/PaleoRadio. And he took some pictures of us, and we were enjoying it. Actually, that was where the Trump's Third World hashtag was. We may be the first people to use it. I don't know. Go and find out. Hashtag Trump's Third World. And we were showing the sadness and squalor that we were wallowing
that we were
in.
living in being third world Americans.
All on our iPhones and Androids and all on a nice comfy couch in Zealand.
In Zealand,
Michigan. So anyway, now listen, we can't wait any longer on this topic, Joe. This is seriously super duper important.
Yes, it is. And after we get into it, too, if you guys would like to call us, I have a feeling this may draw in some interesting calls, and maybe not always positive ones. But, yeah, please do call in 616-656-1680.
All right, Speedo hike.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw a Speedo hike, I just knew. It's over. For one, I knew it was going to be canceled. I just said it's too good to be true almost in today's collegiate atmosphere to have a Speedo hike anymore.
Yep.
And I'm getting the look from Lauren. She's going to love this segment. It's going to be a lot of fun. But it was canceled.
Yes.
And it was canceled because of body image and broiness concerns. And that's a quote about the broiness
of going on a Speedo hike.
This is by Stephen Glick over the Claremont. I think the Claremont is the campus newspaper, but I saw it over at the Independent, at Campus at Campus Reform. I think it's the Claremont Independent is what I think it is. I think that's the actual place. And I saw it over at Campus Reform. But it says this, On the Loose. It's the name of the organization, OTL. The Outdoors Club of the Claremont Colleges unannounced the cancellation of its annual Speedo hike due to concerns regarding body positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Body positivity. And the event, which had previously been one of OTL's most popular of the year, involved over 100 students from the Claremont colleges hiking up Mount Baldy in Speedos.
Mount Baldy.
I
just realized this. I didn't do a read-through. We didn't get here early enough to do a read-through, and I'm going through it, looking at it, and it says Mount Baldy.
How can you not love an event like that? Where's the wrong in such a thing?
Yeah,
I just don't know.
I mean, in fairness, there are a lot of heavier people, myself included. I don't make a habit of sporting Speedos, hiking up mountains.
Neither.
I mean, I lose my breath sometimes just sitting up out of bed. That's kind of my world. I gain weight seeing a McDonald's sign.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am in life. But at the same time, would I go to a Speedo hike and hike up Mount Baldy? Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally would. And even, you know what? For fun, I might even sport a Speedo. Maybe not. But
why not,
Either which way, I would totally go. You know what I mean? This is an outdoors organization on the loose.
Now, that's the thing that I have a problem with is this organization is outdoors. It's about promoting being outdoors and doing all those things. The students that responded to it had some interesting things, but I want to read what OTL's website had said. By having the Speedo hike as our official welcome event of the year, we unintentionally sent the message that to participate in OTL, you must be fit and comfortable with your body image. The name Speedo itself inherently implies broiness. OTL is so much more than just that, but But many potentially interested students got turned off to our club each year because of the Speedo hike.
I hope they at least do a Speedo hike at some point during the year. I mean, even if it's not the introductory thing that says, hey, if you want to be part of this, do this, that at least at some point during the year, they have this hike.
Do you think it would do people that tend to be behind supporting things like body image, which I think is a good thing, especially in media that we're getting? When we talk about the body image that's coming off on magazines that everybody is seeing at the store, I think there's a fight to be fought, right? But for things like this, I take up issue with the idea of saying, because I don't do it, I can actively go out and stop others from doing it. And that I have serious issue with, especially of all places on college campuses where diversity of thought is supposed to be the thing that people are okay with. Hey, look, you don't want to go. We had a walk at Saginaw Valley that was called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, where men would put on high heels and walk a mile in support of rape awareness and women's rights and things like that. And there are some guys that would put on tennis shoes and walk it. Now, we didn't yell at them and shove them down and say you had to walk in heels. The premise of it was that that's what some people were allowed to do if they wanted to, and not. And if that would have got shut down, being that it was misogynistic or something, where it was like some sort of joke, or because it is a article of clothing that some people could be offended by wearing, or heavy people could say they couldn't have worn some of them, that if that would have been shut down, that would be awful. Because the intent of it is, I think intent matters. The intent of that is to get more people out to enjoy the hike in kind of an awkward and kooky way. It's not to say we are expecting everyone here that shows up to be in a Speedo, and we have X amount of colors you can wear, and they have little Speedo regulators.
Sports would be totally hosed. I mean, the swim team.
Yeah.
The swim team. I mean, you just sit there and say, listen, it seems disinviting to people who are extraordinarily, obese. It does. The outfits that you wear. You don't get to wear the heavier trunks with the drawstring that kind of offsets the Dunlop over my belt stomach.
Yeah.
I have one of those.
Yeah.
Right?
Dude, we're both heavier guys. We are just, this must be noted that this is being said by two men that are not the best physical shape you could be in. Like, I wouldn't be totally comfortable throwing on a Speedo and running up the mountain. I may be crazy enough to do it as a joke.
Right.
But I'd be doing it knowing that the joke is my body.
And what about gymnastics? I mean, in gymnastics, the leotards that people wear, I mean, that's just disinviting to somebody who is hyper obese.
Yeah.
It would dance for crying out loud. I mean, there are so many things that people participate in that if you wear those things, it would be, again, I'll use the word again, it's disinviting, it seems.
Yes.
It doesn't seem too attractive of an offer for that person to go, hey, those leotards would make my pear shape look fantastic. I don't wear them.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't complain if somebody wants to do gymnastics and wants to wear something that's form-fitting, or even that's kind of a standard uniform that they wear.
Which I think is the point. And one thing, we were talking about this before we got onto the air. I was talking with Darren about it, which when we're talking about, we say social justice warriors, and those do not have to have a party or a committee. Social justice warriors are on both sides. For instance, the people that are getting on Kaepernick and saying Kaepernick must follow this stringent outline of what we expect of him. Even though I can exercise it myself, I expect you to exercise it the same way. Those same people, I think the issue is they're not going to be able to stop Colin Kaepernick from kneeling. They're not going to be able to instill something that makes it so he physically can't do that. But at college campuses, the people that go after something like this, they can get it canceled. They can get someone like Richard Dawkins to not be able to speak because of a tweet that he posted, which actually happened before. You can get comedians that can't be at colleges anymore because of these opinions. I just think it's an important thing to note that if someone has the power to shut it down, I think that's too much power.
I think we're going to have to talk a little bit more about this right after this break.
Absolutely.
Don't go anywhere. It's a fantastic show. PaleoRadio on WPRR.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact PaleoRadio Show at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em.
You just can't get enough of them, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
If you love Paleo Radio, which we all know you do, and you would love to support us, you can support us by going to patreon.com and looking us up, Paleo Radio Show, and supporting us. We do not run on corporate entity. We do not run on any sort of commercials, so we would love it if you could support our show and keep the dream alive.
But we do love when people mention us on Twitter.
Absolutely.
We do. And I actually, listen, Galen, I think it's Broadus. I don't know, though.
We hope so.
I hope so. You can follow him at ILSEC, S-E-C, Celebrant, C-E-L-E-B-R-A-N-T. He's a authorized celebrant through Center for Inquiry, which is actually really cool, an organization I'm involved with. But he also writes over at Pathos Atheist. And he had this. He tweeted this. Chris Matthews, he's hearkening back to the very awkward conversation between Chris Matthews and Governor Gary Johnson, where Johnson actually framed himself as having another Aleppo moment. I thought there's nothing worse you could have actually done
than say that.
By saying that that's what is happening.
Poor guy.
Because then people are going to go and look at that. But he goes, Chris Matthews, Governor, what foreign leader do you most admire? Gary Johnson sputters for 45 seconds. Chris Matthews, okay, what's the dankest strain of pot? And Relay Theology, that's Justin Schieber, right? That's Justin Schieber. He wrote Dying, right? He wrote that. And so we want to give a throw out to him over at Relay Theology. But I wrote back, I said green crack and Godbud. My honest opinion. My honest opinion, the dankest strains, a green crack and Godbud. If you need sleep, though, nothing hits like Death Star. Hashtag cannabis. Hashtag Aleppo moment. I wanted people to see that.
How do you respond?
Well, he responded by saying that he couldn't believe. He said it was the last thing that he would have imagined. And I went back and I said, I'll take this opportunity to, as Paleo Radio Show on Twitter, and people should go and follow us at Paleo Radio Show. But I tweeted out to Governor Gary Johnson. I said, listen, truth is, you know this biz. Like, he knows, Gary Johnson knows more about weed than he does about foreign leaders. And I'm not meaning to make that a slight necessarily, maybe, but the fact that he knows more about it because he was in the business of it. And I asked him, I said, what's the best indica? What's the best sativa? How about dabs? I mentioned dabs. And I said, I want to know this guy's opinion. And I thought, why don't we interview him? We should totally interview this guy, Governor Gary Johnson, about weed. We live in a decriminalized city in a medical marijuana state.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? It seems fitting and appropriate.
Yeah. Well, I think it would make a lot of sense. And plus, he knows that he wouldn't be getting any questions that go outside of the United States, so he'd be safe. Because I think, man, if you're running for president, you can't name one foreign leader that you appreciate or admire or anything.
That's a tough spot.
That's a problem.
It's a tough spot. And they all said Merkel.
Why,
all of them.
But
all
why?
of them.
Is she the only one they know?
I think so. I think that maybe.
Mine is Nicola Sturgeon from Scotland. I think she's a great prime minister. Right. I do. I think she's very strong, and I think that she is fair, and I think that she gives people an equal chance, and I think she's a very good leader.
So I wanted to say something, though, about this, continuing the conversation. And if people just tuned in, you can join the conversation by giving us a call at 616-656-1680. We're talking about the Speedo hike. And I'm sorry we're focusing so much on this, but there were some quotes from this article that I said, man, this stuff just needs to get out there. You have Clarissa Worcester, a staffer at the Outdoor Education Center, and she said, quote, the publicity legacy surrounding that of the Speedo hike is immediately and inextricably ostracizing, not to mention how it directly excludes individuals with religious dressing practices. There it is again. Gymnastics is toast.
Yep, there goes.
Because you're not going to be able to wear a burqa and go out and do gymnastics in the Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it sounds terrible, but that is part of this logic.
It is.
It is. And she goes on and says, no matter what you do, the Speedo hike will manifest itself as an OTL taking out and funding a group of students that is nearly guaranteed to be almost exclusively outdoor experience, which is what the club is about, fit, questionable, and heavily swayed in the direction of outdoor and otherwise privilege that OTL is trying to work against.
But
outdoor privilege.
But if it's an outdoor club, of course, people are going to have more of a leniency towards it. I think it's kind of a matter of perception, though, about the shape that they're in. I'm a very outdoorsy guy, and I'm not particularly in shape. But I do a lot of kayaking. I do a lot of hiking. But I'm not fit enough to be thrown on the Speedo and going up the mountain. I think that it's the concept of what people are believing it is more than what the club is truly about. Which that's why I was talking about intent earlier. And what's the intent of it? The intent is to get more people to come outside and get involved in outdoor activities. It's not to brandish their outdoor skills in front of everyone. And I think that's the kicker, is intent matters in things like this. But it plays to a bigger thing. It's not only just the Speedo event. I mean, the Speedo event is funny. We kind of laugh at it because we're like, wow, at what point, what can go through the ranks of a college that's acceptable anymore? Like, you remember naked runs? Are those ever going to ever happen again? Maybe.
I don't know.
I'm not saying I'm going to miss out on life if they do go away, or they already maybe have. I'm not I don't keep up in the naked running world, but I still think if people want to do it, they could.
Heavily swayed in the direction of outdoor privilege. And I just thought, and I'm thinking like indoor privilege. That's a privilege against people who are homeless or people who are extraordinarily poor in other countries. And the luxuries that you experience inside of a home are on the backs of people who don't have that privilege. I mean, a basketball club, I can imagine somebody who lost their arm in war, feeling like they're ostracized. And not being able to. And as sad as that is to say, man, thank you for serving the country. Thank you for doing that. But you know what? You might have a hard time being on the basketball team. And that's a real thing, though. You're talking about veterans, disabled people. Yeah. There's privilege in the fact that you have all your limbs. It's just mind-blowing.
When there are fights on the table that I think need to be fought, this is the stuff that kind of bothers me about it. Where when there are seriously issues with rape culture in our colleges, and where people don't think that assault's really a real thing. We had even on Grand Valley's campus, we had an issue where they sent out a letter talking about the multiple assaults that have happened on campus, and some of the response to that has been, no, there is no such thing as sexual assault on campus. I know, Lauren, I'm going to bring Lauren in just because, Lauren, you are a Grand Valley student, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you probably even read the dean's letter and saw some responses.
Post?
I did. I kind of called you in on it. I know.
Yeah, I actually, there's a very, I won't say the tweet, name the person right now, but a very disgusting tweet from a student saying, basically, there's no way this is happening, that girls are getting raped left and right. They've got to just change their idea of what sexual assault is, but said in about the most disgusting way possible. And I reposted that with his name, his profile. I emailed the president. Darren here got in contact with the university, friends of mine who work with the university are taking action. I've spoken to his employer, actually. And also, I've had a girl message me with some other very, very unsavory details about him and who he is as a person and her experience. And this just shows the culture that we are thriving in. And his tweet had like 40-some retweets.
Yeah, people believed it.
Yeah, and this is a mindset that really exists, and that just shows what a rampant problem this is.
So now to loop it back in, would you feel is justified in your efforts if your goal were to stop people from running up Mount Baldy in Speedos as opposed to stopping or working against rape culture in Grand Valley? Because I think that it's worth putting both of them on the scale and saying, what is something worth investing your time and effort in, and what is something that's kind of a little bit ridiculous? Mm-hmm. It's only to say that I think that the idea of why people try to shut down a lot of those conversations comes from the same place. So we need to be able to measure it. If that is coming from the same place in the sense of people that feel like there's a lot of wrongs in the world and we need to right them, I agree with a lot of that. I'm not so much of the picket fence guy. Or I'm not the guy that's going to be on the picket line. But I do believe that there are some things worth fighting for. But I think the misplaced anger, the microaggression thing that we hear about a lot, that type of stuff really kind of makes me smile a lot. It's really what grinds my gears with Peter Griffin. We talked about this.
Yeah.
People are Family Guy fans. It's just a whole list of what grinds my gears and really nothing more.
All the time. And listen, stuff like that needs to be called out. I don't know how I feel about doxing people, but I do know that calling it out and putting it through the the cruncher there of rigorous debate is unquestionable. That is something that needs to be done. And I look at this and I say, I echo the sentiments of one of the students who said, this doesn't get anybody outside.
Yeah.
This is, wow, okay, so now they get to sit down. Or, I mean, it doesn't compel anybody to say, hey, I wanted to just enjoy running up, a mountain. I wanted to enjoy getting outside and just having fun with other people where my heart is pumping, where I'm not sitting down enclosed by a bunch of walls around me.
Yes. I think one big thing, just going into the Speedo hike, that is very pertinent to the point is Samuel Breslow. He pointed out that the attendees of the Speedo hike in the past years have not actually been forced to don Speedos anyway, saying, quote, I think it's important to note that wearing a Speedo is not a requirement of participation in the Speedo hike. I can also speak to it from personal experience. I decided to keep my clothes on in comfort and in order to lessen the sunburn, and no one ever pressured me in the slightest to take them off. So here's a guy that just went up the mountain regularly clothed during the Speedo hike with everybody, saying that I'm a little upset that I didn't get to go.
Yeah, once again, for people just tuning in, you don't have to wear. There was no rule that said to be part of the Speedo hike, you got to be in a Speedo.
Because it's not a Speedo club.
It's not a Speedo club.
It's an outdoor club.
It's an outdoor club.
This is ridiculous.
That's trying to, but this is listen, I know we've talked about this for a long time, but sitting there and saying this is something that is indicative of a lot of the way that groups on campus and even off campus and on social media, how they deal with disagreements, how they don't really think through just how broad their heresy hunting would have to go if they wanted to equally apply their logic to other things. Like, for example, we mentioned a football club or a basketball club or gymnastics or dance or miming, for crying out loud. I mean, you could literally mention so many different things that if this logic was applied to it and the heresy hunters went all over the place to find out in what way this doesn't jive with their personal thoughts and feelings, we'd be really freaking hoes. I think we would just be a very depressed country. Even we're more depressed than we are now.
Yeah, I think so. And then you also have comedians. And me as a stand-up comic, this is kind of where this comes from for me. I have a personal vendetta with the idea of pushing against things that we say because, again, what's funny and what's not funny comes from the same place. The only way you know if it's not is to throw it out into the ether and see what your response is. And there's an inherent danger to walking the line. You're going to suffer from that. But if people don't understand that that's part of the process, they don't forgive you when you go over the line. And I think we've seen a lot of examples with radio show hosts that have been kicked off the air for things that they said, where I don't know if it's necessarily right. I think that things were said in bad taste, but I don't think it's enough to take them off. Again, because those things come from the same place, and you have to know that.
What's in bad taste is that we're still only an hour long, my friend, and that's the music.
It is the music.
It is the music. We're done. If you want to follow us, make sure to check us out on Twitter at PaleoRadio Show. And find us on Facebook at facebook.com/PaleoRadio.
And as always, you can donate to patreon.com/PaleoRadio. Thank you guys very much for listening. We love you. We love you. We love you.
You've been listening to Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.